Okay everyone, this is Avatar Sage 7, and today I'm going to be talking about whether Path of Exile is worth playing in 2021. So that's really the big question for all you looter action fantasy fans or fantasy action looter fans who are either new or returning back to the genre, or who are looking for an alternative to Diablo like games, or Diablo 3, or even possibly the upcoming Diablo 4. And so the question, like I said before, is Path of Exile worth playing in 2021? And by no means am I a hardcore player. However, I have been the main quest with 6 or 7 of my main characters, sorry, 5 actually, based on my list currently at the moment. And yes, Kintava has been killed plenty of times already. So last I checked, I've spent about roughly 690 hours on this title. And what I'm going to say is probably going to be based on my experiences through that 690 hours, having gone through both the Blight, Harvest, and the Legion leagues so far. I skipped Heist because I was just kind of, burned out over it. I mean, this is not a game that you necessarily want to, especially if you're a casual, you don't want to be playing this like constantly as your main game, unless of course that's your thing, because if it is, then in which case this game is just definitely for you all the time. So of course, mind you, with Path of Exile 2 on the horizon in 2022 and possibly 2023, depending on whenever the pandemic loosens up all the trouble for all the game development studios, Path of Exile will probably become a much more different beast, or not really, but at least somewhat more improved. So let's get down to the good and the bad, and we're going to start with the good. Is the builds. The build variety in this game is just insane. Like, it is just absolutely massive. And I'm just going to log into one of my characters as to show you an example. Not sure which is the better one here. Probably Ascendant level 86 is one of my highest. Yeah, sure, why not? I haven't logged into my Scion in quite a bit of time. So the build diversity is just massive, like far more possibilities than either Diablo 3 or Diablo 4 could ever offer to a character, really. So I actually have some cosmetics on this character anyways, as you can tell. And literally, if you just look at the tree, you will literally see just how many possible nodes. Like, this dwarfs anything any current isometric action RPG game currently has available in terms of the variety of options and builds that you can do. You can literally change yourself to use or specialize in various aspects of combat. Either it could be totems, golems, arrows, swords, stabs, maces, literally, or even types of spells, lightning, even exact types of spells, like specifically like charged lightning bolts, or huge nova waves, or explosive blasts, or rains of toxic arrows. You name it. Literally, anything you want to specialize in is possible in Path of Exile. As of this version, or of this version, or the next version, actually. So there are literally players who experiment and tinker with both weak and strong builds from league to league, and the ability to create this kind of power fantasy build of whatever you can imagine is really what makes this game heads and tails above any of its rivals, including Diablo. And I really don't see Diablo as being anywhere close to what Path of Exile offers, except perhaps because of its already pre-existing large fan base. I mean, I used to be a huge fan of Diablo as well. I've played Diablo 1 and some of 2. Never really found 3 to be all that enticing, to be honest. So tons and tons of possible builds. You could literally go to Path of Building or other build sites, poebuilds.com or something. If you search for that, you can literally find tons and tons of builds built by other players already who've experimented. And that's one of the things, is like the near possible amounts of experimentation that you could do if you want, of course. For the casual player, this may not be as important, and you will see that this may actually be a bit of a con for more of the casual players who don't want to invest that kind of time to learn about the skill tree or to follow builds. The other thing is, of course, the replayability. So the replayability of this game, of course, is as similar to Diablo, but also far greater than that because of the fact that A, you have the near infinite number of possible builds that you can use, and B, the fact that you can literally go and map as part of its endgame, something I think I talk about later on in this thing. So if you go to your hideout, you can literally activate a map device, insert maps from your stash. Where are my maps here? Insert these maps and literally open up a completely new specialized one-hit kind of zone that you can, or level that you can literally enter. So you can enter it and then of course kill the boss, get loot, kill mobs, and each time it's different. The monsters are almost always a different type. It's never something that you expect. You can in fact find tons of currency items from your cred tab, things that are like sextants, or other sorts of watchstones as well, for example, like simple sextants, prime sextants, things like that. You can even modify them to be magic maps using orbs of alteration that allow you to create magic monsters or completely alter the entire map as well. So the replayability is just massive. You're literally going to have every level of this game be a random map for the most part. So every time you come back to it, it's never exactly the same. The bosses, the mini bosses, well, not the quests and side bosses. The main quest bosses and the side bosses are almost always the same, and that's also going to be one of the cons you'll learn about later. But literally speaking, literally every level is randomly generated, as it would be in Diablo. But now you also have the ability to pick and choose your own maps, make maps as difficult as you want in the end game. And so not only do these maps have that ability to be modified, like it will also have all of the league mechanics as well. So that's just the end game stuff, but also in your basic general levels too, whether it's the Imperial Fields or other levels or areas of the quest, as you can see here, these will all have special side areas or special random encounters that came from what we could term past league mechanics. And it could be Val side areas to Delirium mirror portals, and there's even entirely separate game modes like the Menagerie, where you can go and kill your own beasts and also make magic items at the same time, plus the Delve, which is literally like an endless dungeon that you keep going deeper and deeper into, getting more and more loot and fighting tougher and tougher enemies. So literally that would, of course, you have to go through regular levels too in order to get enough sulfite in order to open this up. And literally the subterranean chart here allows you to see how deep this can go. Literally it can go infinitely deep or infinitely sideways if you want, if you don't want to go get deeper into harder challenges, for example. So like I said, that's just one of the game modes. There's also Harvest and Heist as well. That Harvest allows you to grow your own garden, and then when you finish growing that garden, they spawn into monsters, you kill them, and you get crafting materials and loot at the same time. So going back to the Traveler's Hideout, Heist is another game mode from one of the previous leagues not too long ago, where you essentially go in and do a thug-like smash and grab. And yeah, that's pretty much what it boils down to. It's not really very stealthy in any meaningful manner. So like I said, moving on, the leagues are really, you know, the kind of like same sort of things that they have in Diablo, where you have seasons where you reset, you have a reset of everything. You don't actually lose any of your characters. They go to standard league, but they start a new league where you can start a completely new character if you desire. It's a completely new character. You don't carry over any of the previous characters, and a completely fresh new economy where, again, so they're using this league mechanic in order to keep things fresh and exciting for you to try new mechanics, which then lead to these new special encounters later on that are integrated into the standard edition that you see my character currently in the standard mode or standard league. So that's literally how it works, and that means that the special encounter for that league, like if it's a Blight league, it's 100% chance that you're going to have a Blight, at least one Blight spawn on every map of every level, during the main quest, side quests, side quest maps, and whatnot. So every one of these will have one of the special encounters. So that's some of the things that are particularly good for the replayability aspect as well of this game. And this happens like literally every 3 to 4 months, except during this pandemic, of course. I think they may have changed that then. And of course, during the league, there's tons of achievements and small cosmetic awards, and possible little things you might win as well for making those achievements. And I already discussed a lot about maps, which is another aspect of the replayability. This is really, like I said, end game for this game. The whole point of everyone to beat the main quest and everything is to move through it as fast as possible and enter these maps where you then deal with the atlas. Actually, I'm trying to see how I enter the atlas again. G, yes, here it is. So this is the atlas. I haven't gotten very far with the atlas in terms of standard league, and to be honest, I think they reset all of my progress every time they update or change the end game of the map atlas. Literally, I think everything gets reset and you have to start all over again. So I haven't gotten very far. This is where I am there. I think they saved some of my progress, but not much of it. And it's usually in standard league, everything's the same for all the characters. Like, you all work on the same atlas for the most part, I think. But for each time that you do the new league with a fresh new character, the atlas is always started from ground zero, so you have to do it all over again. And so this mapping is literally the end game, where you're constantly finding all sorts of encounters, randomized enemies. The bosses are kind of the same for the Conquerors of the Atlas, and now they've got Echoes of the Atlas with the new Maven final boss instead of Sirius. So as you progress through this atlas, the challenges get progressively more difficult as well, just like delves and whatnot. And of course, they'll become also much better, and you can also modify the maps to make them even more lucrative for your grinding and clear speed killing. So the possibilities are huge for those players who are willing to grind through this kind of end game, and it is both its strength and also one of its not so great strengths, because this really only appeals to the top percentage of players who have the time to grind through this sort of thing, and we'll be discussing that later. So the next great thing about Path of Exile is, of course, the loot. So if you are a big looter who loves the rush of getting exhilarating, unique items and magical gear and weaponry and armor and whatnot, then this is probably your game, because this game has so much loot that literally you're either going to run out of inventory space if you hoard it all, or you're going to have to break it all down for spare parts and currency, which then you then use to trade eventually for better gear and items, or specific uniques and legendaries, or yellow class items, sorry, rares, not legendaries, rares and uniques that you would use for your specific build, which you've probably either prepared, or you're following a build from someone else who has suggestions and whatnot. So if you're lucky, you get a really powerful unique item or abyssal gem or something, and there's just so many different ways to get the loot. It would be insane, like I said. So literally they make huge sales on stash tabs in this game, not just, of course, the cosmetics, which I also got when I paid for one of their supporter packs for the hell of it, which is why my sign looks like this right now. And their cosmetics are pretty good, probably on par with Guild Wars 2 in terms of the flashiness, if not more flashy, in fact. Another good thing about this game is the fact that the microtransactions are pretty reasonable in terms of it's not in your face, and it's definitely not paying to win. And it's all really based on stash, inventory space, and cosmetics, really. So let me go to the shop here by pressing M. So you can see all the specials and things, all the Warlord mystery boxes. That's really like their loot box gambling stuff. I don't touch that really. Armor ones, do they have previews? Unfortunately, their preview capabilities are not as good as Guild Wars 2, where you can actually preview it on your character. You actually have to watch the video to see how the cosmetic might look on your character. Something that is not a deal breaker, of course, simply saying. So yeah, it's really it's priced reasonably well, I would say. It's not like overkill. I think stash tabs is pretty much where they make so much money on it. I mean, I must have bought tons and tons of stash tabs already. Like literally all of this plus all the greens. That's probably nothing really, and there's still quad tabs as well. So that's all the good stuff, the obvious good stuff. So what are some of the cons of this game? Well, I think pretty much some of the main cons of Path of Exile really is also its main story and side quests. Like literally you will have run the main story and side quests over and over each and every time you do a league. So eventually you just get bored of your bloody wits of doing it, and you just want to get through it as fast as possible so you can get to the real end game, which is the maps and the atlas, where everything's more random, it's not predictable, you never know for sure what's going to go on. You're probably going to get surprise attacked by something unless your build is like insanely powerful with excellent clear speed. So most veteran players, like I said, all they do is they aim to get through the quest as soon as possible, get as much skill points as soon as possible, and just get straight to the mapping and end game. That's really where for them the looting and fun really shines for those kind of players. And of course, if you're a casual, this might be somewhat of a annoyance really, because you're literally going to be repeating this content over and over again for each and every league. So as long as you're a casual who's pretty open-minded, in which case you wouldn't mind playing these leagues over and over again just because you enjoy building different characters. But if you're one who really wants a unique story more of the time, then obviously Path of Exile is definitely not going to be something that's going to appeal to you. Obviously for most looter games or RPG looters like this, story is probably not usually the biggest thing in the world for you, but then again Diablo has a lot of lore and story too, so, and that works pretty well for it. The other aspect that kind of is not so great is the Labyrinth and Ascendencies. So for you to get access to your specialized, more advanced class, so this is an Ascendancy pathways, the Scion is weird because Scion can actually access some of the abilities from other classes. So you see I have the Ranger Ascendancy, the Elementalist Ascendancy, the Templar Ascendancy, things like that. So she's a jack of all trades, so she can access the abilities that seem to come from other classes, but you can't master them in a way that's as good as the classes themselves. But to access this tree requires you to run the Labyrinth, and the Labyrinth is a real pain in the ass because they lock that class upgrade system behind it, and a lot of people get sick of having to run the Labyrinth over and over again. Not only that, you also usually have to find a group to finish the more tougher versions of the Labyrinth, which have so many traps and can literally kill you unless you are a non-casual, extremely grindy solo player. So let me find an example where Star Encampment has access to the Labyrinth. And this version is like the number 2 version. It's like literally, I think, 3 to 4 levels of Labyrinth. And so you would go in here, enter the Labyrinth, and do that. I think this character has done only one. How far have I gone in the Labyrinth? Based on this, it would require about 1 or 2 points. I think it's probably, she's only probably in the second Labyrinth. Yeah, so literally that's locked behind there, and this can kind of annoy people, especially casual players who want to become more powerful, but don't want to have to constantly go through the Labyrinth over and over again to do it each time that they're playing. So many have asked for another way to get Ascendancies that don't require Labyrinths, and Grinding Gear Games is working on an alternative in Path of Exile 2, which of course will have its own completely separate quest and storyline there, and a new set of, well, essentially it's a new adventure for those people. And they're still keeping the original Path of Exile storyline, however your characters only sort of carry over in terms of their abilities. So the abilities will completely change once you switch to Path of Exile 2's storyline. So the same thing that's an advantage for Path of Exile in terms of the mapping endgame, so let's go back to the maps here, is also a bit of a downside. For those who are not hardcore, super grindy, have all the time in the world players, now I've got nothing against that, because I too have already spent 690 hours on Path of Exile already. Even I have not progressed very far in the Atlas, mostly because after a while I just get sick of getting myself my backside handed to me, because the further you get, the harder it gets as well, just like the delves, which I might add is just as difficult when you get deeper. And it requires you to grind harder and harder for more gear and more currency in order to upgrade your build and upgrade the power level of your character so that you can actually survive. Otherwise, you come to a point where you hit certain maps and you literally probably get one shot and killed, because either A, your resistances aren't up to par, or B, you just don't do enough damage to kill enough enemies fast enough that they die before they can kill you. Or your mobility just sucks, but normally most builds build to at least have some level of mobility and defense. So like I said, the mapping of this atlas literally appeals more to the hardcore players who have time like this. There's, I don't know, dozens and dozens of nodes here that you just can't see in the completed atlas, so it's just crazy. So like I said, if your gear and build isn't powerful enough, enemies will probably one-shot and kill you, and not only the worst part is, when every time you die, you lose like, I don't know, 5% of your experience. So eventually you're just going to hit rock bottom 0 on your experience bar. You won't lose levels. They'll just reset you almost to the beginning of your level. And this will literally slow down your progression as well. Unless, of course, you grind for better gear. And at some point, either A, you're going to have to do that, or B, you're going to have to find a group of people that you can regularly play with who can help you annihilate everything in their path, which is literally like carrying you. Or not. I mean, like, tons of different tactics can be done. You could find groups by going to the notice board in town to do that. So let's say I go to town. So in Standard League, it's pretty dead. Most people are in the new league. So finding groups are a bit hit or miss. You might find them. So recruiting active users, that's hilarious. Normal breaches. And mostly in Standard League, they're just selling stuff in the notice board rather than actually recruiting people for recruiting people for actual things. So recruiting active users, and this guy's a free-for-all, which means any loot that drops, whoever is the fastest to get it gets it. And this one's permanent allocation, so whoever gets randomly assigned the loot is the only one who can get it. So literally, you're not going to see very many calls for groups in the Standard League. Sometimes it just depends on your timing. If it's the latest league, it's usually extremely busy. What's another downside of Path of Exile, which is also its upside, but in reality, crafting in Path of Exile it's better, it's a lot better, but it's still not that accessible to newer players for sure. For more experienced players, they've probably already unlocked all of this stuff. I've only unlocked, what, a mere third to 40% of it, maybe not even, maybe only 33% of all the possible crafting mods you would need to build the most powerful items that you could possibly get. So it's fairly easy to get started and to do some crafting and upgrading items, but to actually reach the levels necessary to achieve maximum power and the most powerful rares that you would need to complement certain builds that use those, that aren't using all, unique items, you literally have to spend some serious currency like chaos orbs. These aren't even the most expensive ones to like level 3. So this is 3 chaos orbs. This one's like 1 exalted orb, I think. So I mean, you're gonna need some of these, or it might be a divine orb actually. So yeah, it's literally quite expensive. No, this is the exalted. It's literally quite expensive. It requires you to do a lot of grinding to get that, either the gear that you break down and barter away to get currency, or to actually get the currency itself. So Blighted and Harvest League did improve the crafting options some more, and you can read about that yourself if you look those up. And what they did was they added the fact that you could grow a garden and then get crafting materials from that, or a specialized method of crafting it with their harvest tables. And Blighted allow you to get anointments from this lady, Sister Cassia, who will allow you to essentially add perks from the skill tree, certain perks anyways, from the skill tree to your items. So that way your item would have the perk and you wouldn't have to get it yourself. And of course you would have to plan your build around that. So you can see just how complex this can get necessarily. And for the newer player, when they look at this, it can literally, it could scare them off necessarily, unless they're following a build or a Path of Exile build guide. And like I said, the other thing, like I said, that was scary is the skill tree, which I just showed you, because it's so complex and there's so many possible perks that you literally either A, have to follow a build, or B, you're already a veteran, so you have an idea of how to build a character that'll suit you or that you can play with. Otherwise, if you're a starting character, it's very easy to build a character that it will be what you want to play, of course, but it may not be powerful enough to get you to the end game mapping or to defeat the main quest, because that guy is extremely difficult to kill. Of course, he eventually does die, so I suppose it doesn't really technically matter how powerful you are for the final boss of the Path of Exile 1 story. And of course, the biggest con is, well, could be the con or the strength, but if we're looking at it from the con point of view, then it's the grind, of course. Like I said, everything here requires you to grind. You've got to kill, which is why killing speed and clearing speed in this game is probably the most important thing. I think that's pretty much the same in every RPG action looter, including Diablo. The faster you kill, the faster you loot. The more loot you get, the faster you can get currency. The more currency you have, the more you can trade for the items that you do need for your build specifically. And so that requires hundreds, if not thousands of hours, depending on how crazy you really are, to reach endgame. And literally, I think last time I saw stats here, like only 2 to 3% of 2.96 2 to 3% of players of this game ever actually even finish the main quest or even reach the Atlas map. They literally just never have the patience or time to get to the final part of it. So you can see that like literally over 90% of players never even really finish the main story or get to the end game, because they're all just busy, you know, going through the regular levels, killing enemies, and regular looting. So that's pretty casual stuff, and that's fine too. But if you're concerned about, you know, never actually reaching the end, and you'd like to reach the end but you're a casual, then this game probably isn't going to work out for you in that regard, especially if you're a completionist, unless you're a completionist who loves the grind. So, like I said, if you're looking for a game that's literally superior to Diablo in almost every way as a fantasy looter action RPG, then except maybe in terms of the lore level. I mean, the lore in this story world is pretty good, but compared to the background and history that the long history that Diablo franchise has had, the Path of Exile one is still in the works, I would say. Then, yeah, this game is definitely superior to Diablo in terms of build possibilities, build quality, build options, just the amount of content you can do, from delve to harvest to heists to maps, you name it, literally. And because the leagues are inside of the map, so you're going to be able to do that content inside of these maps as you explore the Atlas at the same time. Plus the fact that the endgame itself has its own storyline, including the Conquerors of the Atlas and now Echoes of the Atlas. So literally the amount of content you have is gigantic. And plus the fact that they also have leagues similar to Diablo, so you're always starting fresh, so you can always start new and build a new character with a new build, so experiment with something different. Gives you tons of variety, tons of options. It allows you to come back to this game, you know, even if you take a break for like an entire league or two and come back, you will still find something to do. And you can always regrind new uniques and whatnot, because they'll be added to the game, and you can always try to either A, trade for them or hunt for them in the next league once they're being found. And yeah, you can literally build the character that you want in terms of ability and playstyle, like I said, even though of course it may not necessarily be the most powerful, especially if you're playing solo self-found like myself. I barely trade for most of the stuff I have. Most of it is just whatever I found. Like, I'm not even using the optimal staff for this Scion Cyclone build, actually. So I'm just playing with whatever I find, and that too can be quite fun. So if you don't really mind that sort of thing, you don't mind the fact that you may never actually reach endgame, and you just want something that you can spend 20 minutes in between, you know, lunch or during lunch just to kill a few things and then walk off, then Path of Exile works out perfectly fine. And especially considering how replayable the game is, the sheer choices you have for things to do in 20 minutes or even longer if you desire. So in that regard, even for casual players, despite the cons of the grind and some of the stuff locked behind certain quests or side bosses, like certain things like crafting mods are stuck behind bosses that are extremely hard to get to, if not kill, unless you've grinded your way to them. Besides those little minor points, I suppose, sort of minor, kind of, then this game is still the one I recommend for anyone who wants an isometric action RPG looter game. I would still recommend this over Diablo. I mean, of course, Diablo has Blizzard's name and the history behind it, and it's a good game, don't get me wrong, especially if you're extremely casual, so casual you don't even want to think about, building or perks or anything like that, and then that's fine too. That suits a certain type of person. But otherwise, that's really my review of Path of Exile in 2021, whether it's worth playing. I would say it's definitely still worth playing. Whether it's going to be your main game of choice among all the things to hold your attention, that will depend personally, primarily on you, essentially. But otherwise, I still recommend it. I still think it's a game that is worth playing, that people can keep coming back to over and over again because the content is always changing, always evolving, and they're always adding more things to this game. So yeah, that's my review. So if you enjoyed that, please do leave a like and or subscribe to my channel, Avatar Sage 7, or visit my website. And of course, I also have a subscribe star where those people who want to support my work in terms of covering these games, specifically Path of Exile, Destiny 2, Elder Scrolls Online, for example, and other MMOs and computer games, can help support my work through Subscribestar, which you can find the links to on my website or on my video channel profiles. So thank you very much for dropping in, and hope to see you next time.